there's this unending pressure on all fronts that really no human being can meet it.
Interesting how many roles we take on as you progress through life. It's almost like Velcro and lint, right? You roll through life and you pick up another role, or you pick up another aspect, you pick up another interest. It's so cool that you've got so many different varying interests that you make time for.
When we grew up, there was a prevailing thought that specialists and specialization is the path to success. One of my favorite quotes all time, I think most of the world gets partially wrong. Jack of all trades, master of none.
People are having therapy discussions with AI chatbots already, and they kind of like them, especially sort of younger generations, more than actually meeting and talking with a human being. Let's just say it's sort of smarter than us and has access to way more information, but there's something special about being human.
We're back with another episode today. How are you feeling?
Any day is a good day when we get to record. It's so much fun. You know, somebody asked me the other day, so how's it going with the podcast? And I said, you know what? Everything we do for the podcast doesn't feel like work. I mean, there's things that I prefer. The recording is way more fun than maybe the research and the back part of that. But we're having fun. And that to me tells me that we're on the right track.
Absolutely. And I am glad that we're recording on a Saturday. We started recording this podcast at Saturday at 9 a.m. And then we got some international guests and we had to record at night, in the morning, all sorts of things. But we're back. And we have a really special episode today because usually, just to give listeners a little bit of background, we find someone cool, we reach out, we kick, scream, beg, plead, maybe threaten sometimes, and call them onto the podcast. They come on, and then we have a great show, and that's all the back stuff that no one sees. But today, we have someone who I consider a very good and dear friend. I've known this guy for almost 20 years. We used to play basketball together before like marriage and kids, and then we would go out and drink beer and have chicken wings and do all the bachelor things. So all that's coming back to me. So today on the show, we have Dr. Krishnan Narasimhan. He's like a genius in medicine. He has done so many things, from being a medical professor to being part of the chair of Doctors for America. He is distinguished faculty in Connecticut. And I'm really glad to have him on here because he reached out to us and he wanted to share some important things that he is seeing relative to men, South Asians, where medicine is going, and what we all can do based on his professional experience to be happier and humaner, I guess. Welcome, Krishnan. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. So tell us, I gave a little bit of a background of a bio, but tell us your creds and tell us something that when we don't Google, what can we find? And it cannot. Krishnan, please. We don't tell lies on the podcast. So don't tell us you're a good basketball player. Don't tell us you can shoot threes. Like, no, we got to be honest. We are journalists here, Krishnan.
Okay. First strike. All right. Hey, again, it's great to be on with you, Dinesh and Seema. You sure know how to make a guy feel welcome. I've never heard such nice things said about me, especially by Dinesh. So this is a really special day. I'm a family medicine physician for a long time, an educator, a health policy advocate. My current job these days is I'm the chair of the Department of Family Medicine at Stanford Health, where we have about 75 physicians across 14 locations and take care of a whole load of people. But I also oversee all our residency training programs at Stanford Hospital. Previously, I was an academic at Howard. Dinesh also taught, was a doctor there for a long time. Just like all of you, probably have too many other roles. Husband, married to a physician. She is much smarter than me, but I get by. And then busy father to 3 kids, lived the whole South Asian immigrant family experience. Big basketball fan, better basketball player than Dinesh, for sure. And have a whole bunch of other stuff that I'm into and interested. But thanks so much for having me on.
So when you said you're a better basketball player, I thought many of our guests have asked us to do like a live in-person event, have all of the guests come on and meet each other and, and open it up to the listeners so that the listeners can meet all of these guests. In my mind, when you said that, I thought at this Happy and Human event that we do, whenever that is, I really want to see you guys go like one-on-one and the crowd can vote to see.
We'll sell tickets. We'll
Will
sell
anyone
tickets.
buy that? It's funny. My nephew,
The stands will be full.
Yeah.
it's funny. My nephew is, he's 8 now, but he was asking my brother-in-law, Nimish, who is also a lawyer. He was asking him about basketball and when people go to professional basketball games and how much do basketball players make. And he was mind blown that people pay to see some of these players, right? And then he looks at my brother-in-law and he's like, "But you play basketball, Daddy." He's like, "Yeah, I play basketball. I play with my friends." And he's like, "But probably nobody wants to pay to see you play." And it's like,
It's so cute.
That's true.
nobody's paying you.
Nobody's paying.
That's the innocence of youth speaking,
Yes.
where it's all there. Krishnan, but tell us what we're not going to find about you. We want to get deep. We want to reveal something about this really accomplished physician that is behind what the world sees on an everyday basis, so that we can really understand some of the things what we're talking about today, what perspective they're coming from.
I just hope one of the things I'm interested in is making a big impact, right? Trying to help people as much as I can. So I think that hopefully filters through some of the stuff I've been involved with. But I like a lot of different things. Obviously, I'm a doctor, but that's not the only thing. Obviously, I mentioned basketball, lots of other sports, love music, trying to get a little bit into music production and picking up a couple instruments late in life. We'll see. Not so great at it, but getting there. Love film, pop culture, cooking. Don't like to be put into a box.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people are like that, right? But we sometimes have to be in boxes. But very busy family life with kids and all that. Have some teens as well, so that also, of course, keeps you pretty busy.
I think it's interesting how many roles we take on as you progress through life. It's almost like Velcro and lint, right? You roll through life and you pick up another role, or you pick up another aspect, you pick up another interest. It's so cool that you've got so many different varying interests that you, importantly, what I heard was that you make time for, which not everyone does.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit, because when we grew up, there was a prevailing thought that specialists and specialization is the path to success, right? And one of my favorite quotes all time, I think most of the world gets partially wrong, and that is the quote that says, "Jack of all trades, master of none." How many? We've all heard that, right? Listeners, if you've heard that, just raise your hand, but keep one hand on the wheel if you're driving. The real quote, the full quote is, "Jack of all trades, master of none, often better than master of one." Right? And so talk to us about that. You obviously spent a lot of time, my wife's a physician, Seema is a physician, she's married to one, and a lot of physicians do listen to this. And so 4 years of college, 4 years of med school, another 3 or 4 years of residency, and then maybe some fellowship. I've just promoted myself to being a physician, but doctors spend a lot of time specializing. And here you're telling me that you're picking up music, you're looking to music production, you have all these outside interests and hobbies.
I'm sure anybody who has lived a South Asian immigrant experience gets this, right? You're sort of told there's certain paths to go. Those are the smart ones. What's interesting, my parents have both passed away, and reflecting back, they weren't wrong. If you think about how all of us ended up, their bet paid off, right? But a lot of it was very focused, very narrow. And I don't know, I felt constrained a lot of times. I'm sure plenty of people felt the same, right? I always wanted to explore that. I was always very kind of independent. And I think, so it's real funny. I picked the specialty, family medicine, which is the broadest, right?
Yeah.
Always called jack of all trades, right? It's not supposed to be a specialist in any particular area. There may be some physicians or other people who look down on it. Let me tell you, when I told my parents that I was going into that specialty, their heads exploded. They were like, "Why are you throwing away, you wasting all this time going to medical school and doing all this stuff and picking that? Why can't you be a, cardiologist or surgeon like this other Indian guy, right? The one who's better than you, right?
There's always that Samir or Rajiv or somebody.
There's always somebody. There's always somebody, right? Who's more perfect. So I've heard that many times. What's interesting and why that quote resonates is, and I know a lot of people feel this, right? Especially people who've done years of training, either to be a physician, a dentist, a lawyer. I think a lot of people now feel a little unsettled, right? I
Mhm.
devoted all this time. I had my whole life figured out. It's all set. I did the right, married, had kids, right? Everything is by the book, but people are
Hmm.
feeling dissatisfaction, unrooted, like it's not enough. That sort of speaks to that there's not just one thing that will meet all of our needs. And that's why
Right.
being broad, having range, having
Mhm.
different interests is important. The other thing I've learned this over time is that you do evolve as a person. You will change over time, right? So the thing that fulfills us, right? Maybe in our 20s and 30s, and it's a certain career, and we're doing that pathway. That may not be it anymore, right? And you've got to pivot. And I know, look, I mean, Seema, your own personal journey, you've made that shift, and Dinesh, you too, right? Like you made these big changes, and can speak to that better than even me. That's one thing that I've realized. It's
Mhm.
okay for us to change over time,
Hmm.
right? We don't have to
Yeah.
be in one box, and we probably won't be,
Yeah.
and that's all right.
Yeah. It's scary to have the idea that you could pick up new things. I think because people might tell themselves, well, if I pick up, say, for example, I want to start cooking more. Then for an overachiever, someone who's always had school come easy to them, opportunity come easy to them, even something as low stakes as I'm just going to try to start cooking more.
Mhm.
Our brains immediately go to, well, it has to be really good my first
Mhm.
time out, right? And we're not conscious of the underlying background noise, the head trash, but that shows up, right? We're very intolerant to anything going outside of a specific set of parameters. And
Yeah.
then when it doesn't go well, even if it's our first or second go out, we tell ourselves, you know what, that was a waste of my time, or this is why I'm not the cook and my husband cooks more or my wife cooks more. This is why we always order out. We don't give ourselves enough space to play and make those off-beaten decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can add two more things that I have found from my experience where, the book range you talked about, right? Having range and doing different things. There are two really important things that I think people overlook when you add in hobbies that you take to another level of mimicking your professionalism or your professional life. The first is that you become very effective at things. I think procrastination and being ineffective or inefficient with your time is a luxury of not being very busy. And when you are busy, you find ways to make progress and get where you need to be, rather than stewing in overwhelm or ruminating or starting and stopping and things like that. So you become very effective. The other thing that is very important that was recently pointed out to me about a year or so ago is that when you do it's very similar to the quote, how you do anything is how you do everything, right? When you put your interest and curiosity and your effort into a passion project like this podcast, for example, or my social media, or cooking, or braiding hair, whatever it could be, when you put your interest into that passion project and you bring that curiosity to where you continue to evolve and progress and you stick with it long enough, that passion is transferable. And so people look at it and say, wow, he has grit or she has grit. They stayed with it. They've made the podcast. They continue to tweak it. They continue to refine it. Wow, that's someone I can rely on for insert blank professional, right? As a lawyer, as a doctor, as an accountant, as a parent. Those are two understated benefits for having range, for doing things. And it doesn't matter what it is, but if you take it seriously, people then see you as a serious person.
But it's funny, we had that conversation, I remember, because we
Yeah.
talked long before you were thinking about doing this. And, I'll be honest, I didn't know it would happen, right? Like, it's something in the future, it's something new that you're creating, and you guys did it, right? So, uh, you know, it, it shows it can happen. I just want to pick up on one thing you mentioned, which is curiosity, right? So I will say for me, curiosity has sustained me. It has allowed me to keep growing and adapting. And I actually think back to one time where it was really like in my face, but it's kind of a weird situation, which is actually during COVID, right? So if you all recall, and I was doing hospital work in the thick of things with COVID, and just like everybody, with so many emotions, right, going through all that what's going to happen to patients that I take care of, who's going to make it, who's not, what's going to happen with me, right? Am I going to get it? Am I going to give it to my family? All these things, right? We had all these
Mhm.
fears and challenges that everybody globally faced. But I'll tell you, like even in medicine, after doing it for many years and teaching, sometimes, you do the same thing over and over again, right? And you
Mm,
got it down and it's not new. And, yeah, you're going through some of the motions. The thing I found during COVID was that it was absolutely new stuff, right? So the
Mhm.
whole everything else got wiped out. You had this new disease, this new field. You had to reshape everything, and you had to be curious. So it was like this a brand new start at education, right? So in a weird way, in a time which was very stressful and difficult, I also felt somewhat passionate and
mm,
excited that I got to make these changes. But I'm learning. I'm learning every day.
yeah,
So I've carried a little bit of that with me, and I, even now I'm in more senior roles, executive roles, but I still learn every day, and I
yeah,
think that really sustains me,
Mhm.
in everything I do.
yeah.
Yeah. So my husband Manish and I, we were talking the other day, and he's pediatric critical care, and he was talking about how the longer you stay in that particular subspecialty, what typically tends to happen is that it is exactly what you mentioned, Krishnan. You get familiar and you get set in your ways, and that's exactly when burnout starts to happen. That's
Hmm.
exactly when it's like you're worse at the 10-year mark than you are at the year 1 mark,
Yeah.
simply because you've told yourself, this is how things go. This is how I have the best outcomes. This is how I have the worst outcomes. And I'm going to stick to this. And those are the doctors that call gets harder, right? Like the same pace of work that they were doing gets heavier. And he has found that curiosity and learning something new about something totally different. He's like, people look at me like I'm crazy when they say, so are you burnt out? And he's like, no, I'm just getting started.
Yeah.
Why would I be burnt out? And it just floors people, because I think so many people underestimate the value of learning for the sake of learning, for being curious, for opening yourselves up to seeing something differently, even if it's something that you've looked at for every day for 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I am curious, what if the tendency is for most people to not examine, not get curious? What was it for you? I know you said COVID, but you've continued. My guess is you were kind of already doing this ahead of COVID, is just based on our conversation, right? So, was there something in your life that really prompted you to kind of already have this mindset? Because there are doctors who went through COVID and just said, nope, this is how it is.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't, I don't know if I have enough self awareness, but I'll say this. It was definitely a long time before then, and we could talk about it. Some of it is, you know, maybe I wasn't as confident in lots of things. It's taken me a long time to sort of get there, right, to
Yeah.
build that up, and feel comfortable. But I was always sort of interested in lots of different things. Even when it was work I was supposed to be doing, right? You're studying for something or studying for a test. There's always something else that's interesting, right? That caught my attention. So um, I think I never liked to live in that box. And as I kind of went through my career, I did some fellowships, and they were like in other areas, right? Like, got
Mm,
into health policy because I was interested in this stuff, but it's something very different. Very interested in government, politics and advocacy. Those were other worlds. But I loved all that. I loved all, the new experiences, and then how everything kind of connected together. So I think I've kind of
yeah.
always been that way. That's continued to grow. So I've done a lot of different things. Maybe it's a lack of focus, but it's all been enriching advocacy and connecting with lots of other groups. I did a healthcare startup for a while as well, which was a lot of fun, a lot of hard work, but a lot of fun. So I've engaged in a lot of like non-medical circles, which has
Hmm.
only, I think, helped me. So to your point, Dinesh, about doing other things that you have passion for, that drive you, that challenge you, can make you better at
Yeah.
your core job.
Absolutely. I don't want people to hear what we're saying and get stuck on finding the thing I'm passionate about and say, oh, you know what? I agree with you. I need to do something else. But first, let me take 5 years to find that one thing that I'm going to devote myself to. It doesn't have to be that. I think anything that comes across your your plate or your desk, if it seems interesting and it doesn't seem like it's going to set you back and there's an opportunity to try something new, my philosophy in life now is I don't try to talk myself out of things. I talk myself into things. So just this year, I was at a lunch with a client and a friend who said, "Hey, have you heard about barbecue school?" I was like, "What's barbecue school?" And I checked it out, and lo and behold, 9 months later, I was in the jungles of Georgia, the forests of Georgia, cutting up a whole pig and grilling like a 200-pound hog. And I'll tell you, that was really insightful and made me a better cook and made some great relationships and something that opened my eyes to a part of the world that I didn't know existed, right? And I think that's another thing, is that by trying new things, you take off the blinders, because let's face it, um, everyone has a favorite food or a favorite music or a favorite cologne or a favorite person. They wouldn't have met or found that thing if they didn't try something new at that time. So let's say your Thai food is favorite. You like Thai food. You got to go back to the first time where you tried it. It wouldn't have become your favorite if you said, "No, no, no, Mom, I'm good with peanut butter and jelly." So
Oh.
I know you have a lot to say about happiness, Krishnan. You have been on a journey as well. But what do you think we're missing about happiness? I think you have some great suggestions about the podcast, or you have feedback about the podcast. What are your thoughts about what we're doing here? Is happiness attainable for people? Is it a goal that we can never get to, but it's in the pursuit of happiness that we find happiness?
Yeah, let me start off with a true story. Okay, so I was getting my hair cut a week ago, and was talking to the person cutting my hair, and mentioned the podcast. Right, we got talking about it. So I asked her, I was like, "Hey, what do you think is the secret to happiness?" So without missing a beat, she says, "Be good looking."
Mm,
So I was like, I didn't think of that. But not all of us are glamorous podcast co-hosts, right? Not of all of us hit the genetic lottery. So how can we mere mortals, right, be happy? So, I thought about that and thought about my experiences. And I think, like I said, I don't know if you guys had this as a foresight when you started the podcast, but you've got the two questions that I think people care about right now, right? One is, how can I be happy? Which in these kind of tumultuous times is not easily gotten or
mhm,
acquired. And two, what does it mean to be human right now? And I think
mhm,
as we think about technology, artificial intelligence, man, that question is going to be really more and more important. Like, what does it mean to be human, and what do we emphasize? So I think about all those things, and I just think a little bit about my experiences. So as a family physician, one of the things is we take care of everybody. We take care of
Mm.
any patient who walks through the door in whatever stage they are.
mhm,
And a lot of times, to be honest, I meet people on their worst day,
mhm,
right? You're often meeting people with it's a good day or they're happy, maybe they're a little stressed, but I'm usually meeting them when they're really bad off, right? So if they're not coming for a regular physical, they have something serious. They might need to go to the emergency room. They might need to get admitted to the hospital. I might have some very bad news, life altering news for them. So
mhm,
I'm often meeting people not at their best, uh, at at often low points,
Mm.
but we work with them to get through that. Right? We work with them to get to a better place from a health perspective. What we often say in family medicine is that we meet the person where they are,
mhm,
whatever that is. Right?
mhm,
So in whatever state. And I can think about so many people, people going through cancer diagnoses, going to end of life. I think about my patients who've gone through addiction issues, and you've had wonderful podcasts where you really people really shared their journeys. But you think about there's lots of ups and downs. So I think one of the things that we are missing in talking about happiness is a little bit of acceptance of where we are in the
mhm,
journey. One, that
Mm.
we're on a journey, that we're not
Mhm.
these kind of like fully realized individuals, and that we are going to change and evolve. It doesn't mean we're not going to try to get better at some things. We all are, but that we need to have some understanding or acceptance of where we are, and that it's okay. right? It's okay to not have everything sort of figured out. And I think this is the thing that people are facing right now, right? Yeah, like we talked about, there are a lot of people who, they thought their life is all figured out, and
Mhm.
now things are changing, and they're not quite as happy. They feel unsettled, unrooted. But I think this ability to accept where you are on that journey is really critical. So meet yourself where you are.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
What does that look like? I mean, I know we try not to get too political one way or another on the show just because we want everyone to feel accepted and welcome. But, what comes to mind for me is a lot of the insecurity that's happening right now around like federal employees there's a return to work order. um, there's a lot of shifting that's happening. And then people have been told you don't have a job. And then a few weeks later, just kidding, you do have a job, come back. What would you say to somebody who they rely on their income, they rely on their ability to do their job, whether that's from home or in the office or however they do it, and it seems a little cavalier, it seems a little almost insensitive to someone going through that without having all the other supplemental life skills that can help and can reframe. But for someone who's in the thick of it, what would you say?
One thing is, those are not easy situations, right? And again,
Of course.
especially if you have no control over, those get very difficult.
Exactly.
Now, I will say, like, I've taken care of people at all strata of life, right? For people who have no means, no insurance, no income, right? People who are homeless, have many other challenges, to those who kind of theoretically have everything, but we're working on bettering their health. So I've seen a lot of different gradations there. Um, but it sort of doesn't matter where you are, right? Because I think you can get unsettled at any point. Obviously, loss of income in this day right now, with inflation, how much things cost, is not an easy situation, right? And to just set the political stuff aside, but just thinking more about what it means for an individual. So you find yourself in a less than perfect situation that you didn't create. The natural inclination for a lot of people is, obviously, if there's someone to blame for that, that's great. But if not, you turn it inwards, right? You blame yourself. I didn't do something right. I didn't, everything had to be perfect, and now it's not perfect anymore. And that's very hard for people to take. Having an awareness and understanding of there will be ups and downs, and this is a down, right? But for any of us who've lived long enough, if we've been through them, no one can tell you that there won't be anything like that. Those things come up and down. And so having that understanding, having that long view, I think is really critical. And like I've said, I've seen people at their lowest, and we
Yeah.
try to build them back up and work through using a therapeutic relationship to get
Yeah.
somewhere better. Most people can do that, but it's not always easy.
There are so many things outside of our control, and it's an illusion, right? We tell ourselves if we have an education, if we get married, if we save 5 million in the bank, then we'll have all this security. But it just takes one diagnosis, right? It just takes one instant for something to just completely shift how you approach things and what's on your plate. And when we don't cultivate that ability to be happy when things are stable, that's when life gets those, they throw those curveballs at you. It becomes really difficult to get back on the horse, if you will. You can probably see that even in your patient outcomes, right? Like, I don't have the exact research, but happier people tend to get sick less. They recover faster. A good friend of mine, shout out to Elena, who she was undergoing some major surgery, and she literally danced her way into the OR. Literally danced her way in. And at the end of it, the doctors, like, people were coming by her room and they were going, "We heard you were the patient that, like, the surgery got done an hour and a half before, you like beat records. And what did you do?" And she got to go home like 4 days early. And I mean, she's feeling great. And she's back to being the best version of herself. And she's like, I just danced my way to the OR. It was just as simple as that.
Yeah.
You're totally right about the sort of power of positivity. There's a lot of like psychoneuroimmunology benefits that we know of, and some better outcomes. But I will say, I think there's a little bit of pressure on people these days, right? In addition to everything else, like you also have to be happy. And I
Hmm.
think one thing we want to give is a little bit of grace for people that there are ups and downs, right? We see them, we've all lived them. Some days are not going to be great, right?
Yeah.
And some challenges you have to weather. I mean, to be honest, I mean, a little bit of living, if you talk to anybody who's older, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
They have survived a lot of stuff, right? That's part of it. You don't get to that age without having gone through many things. So I think there's some of that too. And, I'm guilty of it myself. Like I find it way easier to give grace to my patients
Hmm.
than myself or, family and friends sometimes, right? So I think that's something we should also extend to ourselves,
Yeah.
Hmm.
especially when times are tough.
Yeah, I agree. I heard a long time ago, and I've been criticized for having this thought, but it's a principle that serves me really well. And that is, I remind myself that all of life, we're either going into a storm or coming out of a storm,
Hmm.
right? It's just one storm after another. And in between, we have patches of calm seas and pleasant light and sunlight and things like that. And, that really grounds me in a lot of ways because when I'm in the good time, I can really enjoy it. I don't take it for granted. I don't wish it was different because it's right here, and I know it's temporal, right? So it moves. And then when I'm in the bad times, and everyone's got bad times, everyone's got good times, I know it's sort of phasing, and it will move on. Just like with young kids and children, everything
Hmm.
is a phase.
Right.
And that in a sort of a roundabout way allows me to have gratitude for and acceptance of where I am at each time and gives you a little bit of perspective, which prevents you from freaking out. I think it's the freak out where when the world is crashing in on us and we don't have control any longer, that we really can do some damage and set
Mhm.
ourselves back mentally, physically, things like that. But there's so many ways people say this. Like if you're religious, if you're a Christian, you say let go and let God or something like that. It's this mentality of surrendering to what life throws your way and riding the waves, knowing that you'll come out on the other side.
Mhm.
There's going to be something good that comes from it. There's going to be something bad that comes from it. You'll learn and you'll evolve, and that is the human experience.
Right.
And anything other than that, we're just kidding ourselves because if we think that my ideal life is sipping pina coladas on a beach in the Caribbean, I mean, that's what, 6, 7, 8 days at most, right? I mean, if you add up someone's life and say, okay, how many days were you in paradise where it was perfect? What is that? 25 days, 50, 100 days of your entire life? The rest of it is bobbing and weaving,
Yeah.
right? Like you say.
Well, I mean, I'm Christian. Have you experienced this where like you're on vacation, you're in paradise, and then the family next to you or the person next to you is just absolutely miserable? Like, like you're at Disney World or
Yeah.
you're on a Disney cruise and these people are just not to fault or judge or criticize or blame, but I mean, have you seen that where dude, you're in paradise and even paradise can be hell,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, let me tell you, we might have been those families, that might be our own kids, right? So, that's probably our fault, right? But, I'm sure some other family was like, look at these guys, right? So
Yeah.
ungrateful. But I've been on vacation, tropical paradise, in the pool, and we have some really good friends that we travel with. And, you know, this is a lawyer, but she had her laptop like in the pool and is doing work and sending off emails and all this
Yeah.
while everybody's like jumping around in the pool. So you know I guess you do your best, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Some people,
Right.
I think we're not as good as enjoying things as we used to be, right?
Ah,
That's a
yeah.
muscle that might be lost. So
Talk,
Yeah.
talk to us more about that because I've heard that in a way where people save and deprive themselves of a $5 latte, right? But when we have the money or we have the means or we have the opportunity to enjoy something, we're not living like a rich, wealthy life. And I don't mean helicopters and things like that. I mean just enjoying life in taking and savoring the things that we have, we're always so concerned about, saving or getting to the next one or not falling behind or things like that.
There's an interesting phenomenon that we're seeing now that I think is another thing that's affecting our happiness. And we can point to social media, we can point to where society is going, but it's this little bit of kind of almost grind culture that is beyond just, career advancement, right?
Hmm.
So, that was one thing you knew, right? You had to achieve these levels. This is what making it looks like. But now it's sort of extended to everything. For those of you who are parents, now there's this whole thing. Again, being a mom right now, very tough. And in a way that our parents didn't have to deal with. So many kind of inputs. I'll just tell you, I'm doing my best, but just the
Yeah.
email load from my 3 kids' schools is crazy, right? Like, and
Yes.
yeah, I need
It's like,
some.
why am I getting emailed that you're gonna change the seating arrangement in the classroom? I don't need to know that.
It's like a full-time job just handling that, right? So that, and
Yeah.
that's just one thing, but then it's to everything. To your point, Dinesh, there is, if you can do a vacation, all these other people are doing it magnificently, and you gotta keep, it's the keeping up with the Joneses a little bit. This is what a real vacation at Disney looks right? It needs to have X, Y, Z. So I
Yeah.
think there's this unending pressure on all fronts that really no human being can meet it, right? You can excel at one thing, but how can you excel at everything? So I think
Yeah.
that's a societal thing that we're gonna have to unwind and pull back a little bit. Part of me almost worries a little bit about, too much positivity. That
Yeah.
that's another thing you got to be good at, right? Like, you have to be good at all these things. And by the way, be extremely happy and show it also,
Yeah.
because if you're not, you're failing at that too. So I think we have to reevaluate that, because I think that's unsustainable. It's leading to a lot of general unhappiness in society, and if we don't take the steps to, I almost think, reduce those inputs, to
Mhm.
say, hey, I'm going to reduce the things that I can care about,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Yeah.
I only have a finite amount of bandwidth or headspace to deal with it, and the rest I just got to set aside. Maybe I'll get to it later,
Yeah.
maybe I won't, and I think those limits and boundaries are going to become increasingly important.
Yeah.
Right.
It seems to me that people, when you say be happy, they believe that that means in totality, I am happy. And in reality, from my perspective, what we're looking for is joy, right? Happiness is, oh, somebody ahead of me in the coffee line paid for my coffee and now like that's cool, right? Joy is a far deeper emotion.
Mhm.
It's more self-sustaining. It's auto-generated. But importantly, it doesn't invalidate another emotion in the process. In other words, I can be deeply saddened by something that happens, for a friend or a family member, or for myself. There might be something that might be going on that's really hard and tough, but that doesn't mean that I can't find joy in listening to my niece laugh.
Hmm.
Right? That doesn't mean that I can't find joy in just sitting and feeling my breath and swimming in gratitude for something else that might be going well, right? So that's just my quick comment is, for those of us who are looking to feel happy all the time, it doesn't mean that you're happy and only happy. It means that you're holding many things without
Hmm.
invalidating. That's just my offer. Speaking of happiness and joy, what I'm seeing is for people of our generation is they'll take their kids to the mandir or the masjid or whatever, but they're like, well, but it's not really my jam. Okay. Like that's not really my thing. I want the kids to get culturally exposed, but But take the dogmatic religion out of it. Talk to me about what is the role of faith here for you?
Yeah, no, what a great question. And I'll just say I grew up, sort of in a in a Hindu, uh, cultural, but also very religious family from South India. We don't mess around, right? I was at the temple like all weekend long, right? Growing up, all day long. And my parents were off doing 50 different things, and we would just hang out there, right? The intensity of faith, of course, varied depending on what was
Yeah.
going on, but like, you live in it, right? You live in that culture. It's a part of you. And so I think it's interesting. I mean, we've seen obviously religiosity decrease overall, right?
Hmm.
And really interesting as we are at least second, you're talking about second generations, right, of South Asian immigrants with the wave, and our third generations are starting, right? And I'll be honest, I'm still trying to figure that out, right? Because I don't know what that right mix is. And I'm kind of doing it on my own now because my parents are gone, right? Who would be the people I would, you know, they would be harassing me to, oh, you should do this, you should do that. Now it's like entirely up to me. And I do find myself like a lot of people, well, where does this fit in my, modern life anymore? Is it valid? Is it not? So I think people are evaluating that. And we're not the only community, right? So you can see that across the country, right? That all people are trying to find things. There's a sense of overwhelm. There aren't these things that used to root us. Um, those are feeling less substantial, but they might be needed, and I think that's up to sort of each individual. Um, I don't know exactly where it's going to go for the next few generations. If I remember everything my parents did, right, they tried so hard to pass on the culture, religion, music, all those pieces, because they knew that it would fade quickly, and that is a little bit of my worry. Uh, I'm honestly trying to figure it out, right, and like I have to do it. I have to be the one who pushes it forward, and I don't have an easy answer on that, and I think a lot of people are trying to figure out, do you reconnect with that? Do you go a different direction? How does it fit with my life?
Yeah. No, those are deep questions that I think we're just starting to grapple with. And at some level, my feeling is the answer just lies in evolution, right? Um, we Life doesn't go backwards. And so the more we try to hang on to the past, the more sort of we impede the growth of where we're going. And so I think it's fine at some level to let things blend and mix and evolve and retain some semblance of what it used to look like, but also take on a new form. So Diwali in my house doesn't look the way Diwali in my parents' house looked, right? Because there's the influence of my wife and modern realities and what the kids are interested in and things like that. So a simple reason that I think is justifiable, a lot of Indian sweets have nuts in it, right? My son has a nut allergy. So that I think everyone will understand that. But as there's interracial marriages or people get exposed to other things, I think that all of those cultural underpinnings will evolve over time, right? And I think that's not a bad thing. I think it's fine for there to be an African American Santa Claus, an Indian Santa Claus, things like that, as we move together towards a more unified one sort of understanding of humanity, right? We're all the same. We're all having the same experience. And even more so, you realize how connected we are, right? An invisible microbe in Wuhan, Shanghai, locked me in my house, right? And that's not, I mean, you think about that we are so connected now. Look at this. We're having conversations like this, where we're in three different parts of the country, and this podcast is listened to, I think last I checked, like in almost like 1,400 cities or something like that.
Wow.
So it necessarily is part of that. But Christian, I want to ask you about sort of, you do a lot of work in AI, right? And you mentioned this in tying to our name, which we spent a lot of time, and in pure transparency, we spent an enormous amount of time in setting up this podcast. It didn't need to be that way, but we like to do things at a high level. And I remember, if you listen to the podcast, there's a little jingle in the beginning, which welcome to the Happy New Year podcast. I think, Seema, if I remember correctly, that took us like a dozen takes. It's 90 seconds. It took us a dozen takes, and look, we've been going for almost an entire hour on one take. There's the growth we've all had. So here's my question: AI, it's everywhere. It is here to stay. It is not like an NFT or something else that's sort of just a wave. I don't use Google any longer. I just use ChatGPT for everything. What does it mean? What is humanity going to look like when we have robots and people are having relationships with ChatGPT? I just read an article where someone had a full-blown relationship with ChatGPT. And while those things are on the fringes now, they're going to become mainstream. where do we go? What does it mean to be human? Talk to us about deep fakes. How do we know what's real any longer? And finally, AI in healthcare, because I know you have an AI innovation lab. You are at the forefront of this in many ways.
Yeah, no, Dinesh. Like I said, I don't know if you had that foresight, but you
We'll
guys,
just say we did. We'll
yeah,
just
yeah.
say
Let's just,
Of course. Yeah.
we are
ahead of your
smart.
time, right?
We are smart. When you put a doctor and a lawyer together,
Yeah.
bro, like, come on. Like, seriously, all the other podcasts, like, you guys should just do your last episode now.
Um, but I think in reality, people are going to keep asking that question. So I think we're entering a very new phase, and we do have at Stanford we have an artificial intelligence innovation lab, and our focus is not just the tech part of it and its use in healthcare, but the human part. Actually, what that interface between humans, physicians, other health professionals, and patients, and that technology, and how that's evolving, right? Attitudes, impressions, and how people want to use those. So we're getting some great information out of that. But I'll say, and look, the hype around AI is enormous, right? It's so hard to figure out what's real and what's not. But it probably is going to be a very transformative technology. Like you already say, Dinesh, right? Just in terms of looking for information, it's already changing how you do things day to day. But there's not great regulatory framework. It's people are just kind of doing it. Money is frothily flowing into it in a lot of ways, right? Every country's got some approach to it, but nobody's got a great framework for regulating it. I think we're going to see it everywhere. It's already in lots of things, right? You do your iPhone update, right? Apple Intelligence, it's already in there. So
Yep.
I think we're sort of beyond this. Hey, it's a little tool. It's a separate tool that I can keep separate. Those days might be gone. And you raised the thing about stuff that seems, what it was, 2012 film, right? Her with Joaquin Phoenix, like having the relationship with Scarlett Johansson as AI. People
Yeah.
are doing that. People are already doing that right now, right? To your point, I mean, some stuff that amazes me a little bit is people are having therapy discussions with AI chatbots already,
Yeah.
and they kind of like them, especially sort of younger generations, more than actually meeting and talking with a human being. Now, AI is only as good as the information it gets fed into it. And I think one thing we can get into disinformation and lots of other stuff is not all information is good information,
Right.
right?
Right.
Let's be clear. And we were all excited when the internet came out, right? Like democratize access to everything. That's been a mixed blessing, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we're going to see the same thing with AI. I think we will see, unfortunately, a real division, as we've seen in lots of things, of haves and have-nots in terms of people who have the ability to control, right? And we already know that big tech players are moving into that space. Who gets to set the agenda? Who gets to set what the AI looks like? What information it uses? All those things are sort of being decided. So I think we really, and why we're involved right now, is that we want to be able to shape that to the benefit of our patients, and for physicians and others to use it in a really safe and effective way. Um, but I think it's going to change things. And I think the other thing we've been having a lot of discussions about, and I speak to a lot of national leaders around this, is the idea of collaborative intelligence. So already, Vinesh, you're using Chat GPT. I mean, we did it with Google and stuff, but like as an extension, right? Let me modify what information I have at my disposal and adapt it. So I think the near future is definitely how will we pair with AI, right? Like how will it work with us? In some cases, it might be just a tool. In other cases, it might be our partner in a weird way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of things that sets us up. I mean, um, Bill Gates made a lot of headlines recently about that. Human beings are about to be, on the verge of well, AI will be able to do more tasks better than us very soon. So that could be a possible reality that's up and coming. And he did mention, of course, that the two things he thought could be disposed of were teachers and doctors. So
Yeah.
he's a smart guy. Here's hoping maybe he's got a blind spot. But,
Yeah.
I think it'll start setting up the question as AI's intelligence expands as to what does it mean to be human? What
Mhm.
is valuable about being human? Because let's just say it's sort of smarter than us and has access to way more information than
Yeah.
us, but there's something special about being human.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, so, and I don't think that's going to be easily replicated, or it's going to take a whole long lot of time. Um, and it's almost sort of our imperfections and our
Right.
ability to adapt that I think is unique. I mean, I know those aren't like values right now, but they might be, right? They might be in this future where technology takes away all these pieces that, we're industrious or we're productive. Those aren't the things anymore, right, that make us human, but the core things that define us. You're on the verge of having those conversations to answer that question. So that's why I think the work you do is increasingly more and more important.
Yeah.
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 It's interesting when you talk about AI, human connection, and all of that, and you mentioned the quality of the output is only as good as what you put in, right? So
Mhm.
the other day we were watching Galho Naho, and we had just watched Kabhi Kushi Kabhi Gum, like maybe the weekend before.
Mhm.
And, I said, oh my gosh, I think Camilla in Galho Naho is the same actress that played Kajal's friend in K3G. And so Mansi she's 10, she gets on and she asks ChatGPT, is this, whatever. And the answer that we got was completely off. But the only reason I knew that I was correct was because of the information that ChatGPT gave. Like, she didn't have the background knowledge to know, like, the synopsis of both movies, they had flipped Kajol and Karina,
Mm.
right? So what the whole basis of it was off, and it turns out it is Simone Singh, who is the same actress that played both, but she wouldn't have known that,
Mhm.
and she would have believed that what she read to be on there was true, right? And to me, what that highlights is we are still evolving, just like we're sitting here now questioning the importance of equity and diversity and inclusion in humanity. How are you handling that in the AI world? Because this is kind of where your sandbox is.
Yeah, no, I think it's very hard. And in healthcare, there are high stakes with that, right? The information's got to be correct. Some of the concerns are definitely that, um, you know, depends on what data you feed in, right? If you feed
Yeah.
in only data from certain patient populations and not a wide range of people, it'll spit out one set of answers, right? That may or may not be correct. So we know that that's a real threat that has to be watched out for. Again, the regulatory frameworks are being developed, but they're not that strong. Government support of them is going to, seems to have been pulled back a little bit. So uh, it's an open question, and I think one of the worries is that we've seen a real headlong rush, right, from tech companies and others that are pushing very hard, and they're not maybe taking all these steps, right,
Right.
that you need to.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work being done of trying to develop kind of systematic frameworks to do this. It's not easy. Right now AI is prone to lots of hallucinations, making up stuff, errors to your point, right, that you could easily find out. That's going to get harder to tease out, right, as it gets smoother, right? And it'll learn to give you better and better answers that sound really great.
Yeah.
Um, but I think this again goes back to what are the human skills that someone's going to need to interact with however we want to categorize this intelligence, right? You'll still need critical thinking. Like you might need to check what's being told to you, right? Um,
Yeah.
you know, is there another place to look it up? Like, will that exist or not? Those things are going to be critical. We're going through practical things like how you put this into electronic health records. How do you manage patient privacy? So there's a lot sort of ahead for us, but the pace at which it's moving, my worry is that we may not get all those ducks in a row. And we really have to watch out for all those impacts very carefully.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What, one of the issues that has sort of come up, and I think this maybe happened a couple of elections ago, is because media is democratized and it's on social media now, it is very hard to know what is actually true. And I think that that's even true with traditional media now. I think there's a lot of biases, there's a lot of control, there's a lot of agenda driven and fiscal policy driven news out there. When I was growing up, it seemed easier to know the infomercial from the real news, right? And now in my mid 40s, I find myself having trouble knowing what is reality, what is real. This goes back to a lot of the inputs that you're talking about. And just in the healthcare space, should I sit in the sauna 30 minutes 3 times a week? Should I cold plunge? But no, cold plunging is not good for women. It's good for men. Should I take magnesium glycinate for sleep? Should I lower my bedroom temperature to 74 degrees? There is a lot of shoulds that people are being bombarded with. Supplements, healthcare, wellness, sort of vitamin B drips or hair replacement in Turkey. There's just a lot that's out there, especially in the healthcare. And now there's these companies like Function Health, right, where you can submit and get your 100 markers checked, and then it tells you what food you should eat and you're allergic to, and whether you should do testosterone or estrogen replacement. There's just so much complexity now around not only just being healthy, but optimizing your life. Um, what what do you say to the average person, or even our peers, where we don't know if this information is true, it's worthwhile, and how do you sort through it?
It's a grand challenge of our times, and I'll tell you, most of it is not true. That's the problem. But as we were saying earlier, like, not all information is good information. So we live in an information overload time, right? You can get some kind of information about everything, right? You can ask ChatGPT any question you want, and some answer will come, right?
Yep.
Drawn from whatever it is. So I think we're at that tail end of everything that started, honestly, back with the internet, right? Here, you have access to all this information. What do you do with it? And most of the stuff you listed, a whole bunch of stuff, Dinesh, right? There is not a lot of proof for many of those things. I would say probably, like 80 to 90%. If you sat down with me and had a conversation, and I'll say this as a family medicine doctor, right? Like, I don't hold the monopoly on knowledge or anything like that. I always welcome my patients to get second, third opinions, right? You can talk to any expert you want, family members, whoever it is. But I'm pretty confident in that my ability to apply science and evidence that's out there to help your life. You'll come back to me and say, okay, yeah, you were right in general, right? And I'd like to go with your plan. It doesn't always work out like that. There are plenty of people who don't take my advice, and that's totally fine. So I would say one thing for people to do right now is, if you have a relationship with a primary care physician or primary care provider, you should double down on that. If you don't have one, get one. And the reason I say that, and we can talk about lots of great benefits having a usual source of care, is that in this day and age, you need a trusted resource to go to talk about that. And there are other messengers for sure, but the value now is not going to be in the information, right? There's more information than what to do with it. And like I said, a lot of it's nonsense. How are you going to apply that? How are you going to apply that to your life? And honestly, that's what someone like a doctor or any professional, right? Both of you have done those in your life. Someone comes to you, needing help in a particular area, you tell them how to apply. Like, you have a lot of knowledge, but you tell them, hey, this is what works for you, right? This is my recommendation for you. So that's what people need right now. And they're going everywhere. There are less credible podcast hosts out there, right? Like, that are just saying anything. And now that's the new media. That's where people go. And now I think everything's sort of equal. And that's why, to your point, you get so many things, a lot of it that isn't going to make any difference in your life. So, again, people are advertising doing 100 tests. I mean, honestly, 90 of those aren't going to do any change in your life, right? People don't even know what to do with them, right?
Right.
I'm sure people are offering full body scans, everything, and all the other things that you've said. So we're entering this age where it's hard to keep that separate. So again, having a relationship with a trusted professional, especially on the health side, with a doctor or a primary care provider, is going to be really important, much like you would get professional advice in anything else. So there's been a recent upending about, where you can go in terms of trusted sources, right? Can you go to the government anymore, right? Before you used to be able to, unknown, right? We'll see how all that plays out. And I'll tell you, I learned a lot. We did a lot of disinformation stuff during COVID. The problem is trust and expertise is down. Trust in institutions we know is down. So people just, even if you are an expert and you've got hours and hours that you've devoted to it, they don't quite take the same advice anymore. So that's a problem. And that's why everything else, when you confront it with 20 things like you're saying, all the other stuff seems just as good or seductive, or hey, that seems easier to do than, what's this expert talking about, right? I really don't agree with that anymore. So
That's so true and so valuable. When you look at it through the lens that we're all looking for a quick fix, right? And the information seems to compound because one person tries it and they're like, yeah, it was great. And I try it, and it's very great. And very quickly, your usual due diligence mechanisms are eroded away because it's not just one article that you read. It's now your friends are telling you you're doing this and they tried it and their lives look better and things like that. I think what it comes down to is what you said earlier is having these boundaries around your inputs and not taking away your permission to critically think and to live your life. And, we all have different lives. We all have different capabilities. We all have different stressors. We all have completely different sort of myriad of things that go into your lives. And if you're looking at someone and looking at me, for example, or looking at Seema and saying, hey, I'll use me. Like Dinesh wakes up at 5 o'clock every morning. I need to wake up at 5 o'clock every morning to live my life. It's not gonna work for you, right? I have settled on a lot of things that work for me right now, I should say, right? And it may not work right at another time.
Right.
And I think a lot of people need to give themselves that permission again to live their lives, not the life they think they would had if they did what other people are doing, right? So, Krishnan, you're such a wealth of knowledge and such a good friend. This has been long overdue. I'm glad you came on a Saturday as well from your home office.
It's been fun. It's been great, guys.
Yeah, you're a great guest. I don't know if people have told you this, but you're a great orator, a fantastic speaker.
Yeah.
I usually just, heard you in the back after I've blown past you in basketball. But, talking to you face to face is
All
really
lies.
nice.
All lies.
All right. So, like I just said, we live in a world of instant gratification, but that doesn't mean that we're going to demonize it and make it go away. I like things right away. I got a microwave and an air fryer. So tell us one thing through your life, everything that you live doesn't need to relate to healthcare or anything else that beyond a doubt from a trusted source that if we all did today, we would feel the benefits in short order, maybe even tomorrow.
Yeah, so I would say, like I said, the one thing I was going to say before, right? Meet yourself where you are. Like, give yourself that grace and permission to be a little bit imperfect, to change over time. I think that's helped me the most. It's honestly taken me a long time, right? I can't say that I was a confident person. And I'll just relate to you, Dinesh. This is a personal thing. When you were younger, and I know you've shared, even on the podcast, how you've evolved, and we've talked about it, but you always seem so confident. I would probably say cocky, maybe a little too cocky, but but I'll say I almost envied that a lot of times because I was never that kind of confident of a person, right? It took me forever, I think, to get to that level of comfort, but you always seem to exude it. And I always am amazed, and I have, some of my kids can do that. So there's a little bit of genetic component. There's some mindset component. Everybody's a little bit different. As I've gotten older, and I've gotten to sort of figure out, how a lot of life changes go on. But I've been able to figure out that, okay, I'm okay sort of where I am, right? I'm
Yeah.
growing and changing. I'm curious. I'm going to keep getting better probably till the end of my life.
Yeah.
But it's sort of okay for me to be where I am right now. And
Yeah.
that was not something that I was ever very confident or secure in.
Yeah.
But I'm getting better at that. So I think meeting yourself wherever you are, high point, low point, and giving yourself some acceptance and some grace, it goes a long way. So I'd love to leave that with people if it can help them in their lives.
Mic drop. That is it. That is the secret that we're all looking for, is just accepting that it's okay where you are and not being in such a hurry for it to look different, change, be different. Because with the pressure, I've seen firsthand what the damage can be, and so I think that is the world's wisdom right there, Christian. Honestly.
Mhm. Yeah. And I mean, it's true in patient care. It's true, even when Dinesh and I are in a coaching session, we have to meet the client where they are. Kids, right? If they're angry and upset, it doesn't matter whether we see an easy solution or whether it's not really a problem, us belittling it or saying, we just have to recognize like they're feeling this way. And that's how we can be, even better parents, better leaders, better versions of ourselves, is just meeting yourself where you are and being okay with it. But
Mhm.
what I heard was non-judgment in there, self-compassion, which also is a skill, right? You have to be compassionate with yourself and recognize that it's phasic. It's not going to be forever.
Yep.
And the more compassion you can douse onto yourself, you actually get ahead faster, right? Like think of your kid that's having a meltdown. If you were to just give him a hug, you're going to get way further through that tantrum faster than if you were to be like, why are you crying? Big kids don't cry. Like, it doesn't work. I love that you model that for yourself. I firmly believe that how we lead for ourselves is how we lead in other areas of life, and we create experiences based on that.
Yeah.
Thank you for highlighting that. And I have to say, listeners, I'm the outsider in this conversation in that these two men have known each other for years, and as an outsider, it is really, really refreshing and inspirational to see both of you come together, stay in touch, and really value that relationship and that openness and honesty, that willingness to play and have fun and poke at each other. Because from where I sit, I don't actually see that in South Asian men or men in general. I see it with women a little bit more where, I grew up with this friend. I've been best friends with her forever. We take trips every year, blah, blah, blah. But I don't see that a lot in my guy counterpart friends. And I just think it's really inspirational. So kudos to both of you for choosing to maintain that relationship and then share it with the world. Literally, we're on here and you guys are sharing that very, very intimate part of yourselves. Thank you for doing that.
I appreciate you saying that, but it's the product of work that we've both put in,
Sure.
and the experience and the product of living through life, and that's what we hope to do on this podcast, right? Is share what we can share in hopes of helping someone just not have to repeat the mistakes we've made.
You hear that, Dinesh? You're inspirational. So
I heard that,
you can
yeah.
put that down. You're totally right. It's something that I think people don't do enough of. And these days, it's hard to maintain those relationships and friendships. I put a lot of work into it with people like Dinesh and others all over the country and the world. But it takes real work, right? I don't know. People have lost that, right? Especially post COVID. I think
Yeah.
it's really
Especially with Dinesh. It's a lot of work. It's a
it's
lot of work
straight
to
work.
tolerate.
And let me tell you, the other part that's been great of knowing him over time is just to see him change and evolve, right? I tell you, when we first met him, there was maybe some running bets on whether he would stay out of jail or not. But he's made it, and what I've been amazed is that if any people have doubts about can people change, I've seen so much growth from him. Obviously as a husband, as a father, but someone who kind of really embodies all the things that you all talk about, that he's gone through those changes and made those changes. So, as a friend, it's been powerful to see that and someone else and to learn from that.
Thank you, my friend. I'm proud to call you a friend, and I think that it's long overdue.
This is the part of the show that I really enjoy, which is Ask It Forward. So, listeners, if this is your first time listening to the show, how this works is that we've had a guest previous to Krishnan ask a question, not knowing, when we were going to record, who the guest was going to be, what the topic was. I'm going to ask that question to Krishnan, and then Krishnan, you get to answer, but then also ask it forward. This question is from Sonal Patel, Dr. Sonal Patel, who is the founder of Naya Care. She wanted to know, what is an Indian comfort food that the world should know about? Kind of like mac and cheese.
Oh, so much, right? So definitely idli, right? If you're not feeling well, for those of you who had it, right? South Indian rice cakes, right? Just so good. This is very South Indian, right? So, like, if you're not feeling well, always with the family, you would get yogurt rice, right? With like some pickles and, either veggies or curry, something on the side. But that is like classic comfort food. You were sick, you weren't feeling well, have that, or a plate of idlis, heaven.
Good. I'm hungry
So
now.
good. So good. And now I want idli sambar.
Yeah.
What is the question you would want to ask of the next guest?
The question I have for your next guest is, what recently gave you true personal joy? And I mean like personal, not, my kids were happy or something else, which we all do, right? Like it's always somebody else is happy. But what about you? What made you truly joyful recently?
And listeners, we always encourage you to take a listen to this and ask the questions for yourself, because we do as well. Krishnan, you're such a wealth of knowledge. And we don't really have a really strong way of saying thank you other than saying thank you. So at the Happy and Human podcast, what we do is we give the guests an opportunity to share a cause or organization that's near and dear to their heart. And it does three things. It allows us to make a contribution on behalf of you, to say thank you. It also highlights to our listeners organization and causes that are trustworthy, that we know someone is invested in them and can vouch for them. And it also allows people that may not know that the podcast exists to benefit from the conversation, because there's no doubt we are better people by speaking to you. Obviously, our listeners are going to learn from you, and you're going to get a lot of great feedback and people reaching out to you because of the podcast. But the benefits shouldn't stop there. Our impact doesn't need to stop there. So with that, I want to give you an opportunity to share with us a cause that we can contribute to.
We do a lot of community engagement, and one of our partners that we work with is New Covenant Center in Stamford, Connecticut, and I'm happy to share the link to them. And they're a local food bank and soup kitchen. I was just there a couple of weeks ago. They do amazing work in feeding people at their most needy. So would love to, for your listeners to, contribute whatever they can. Honestly, your money is going to go to feed some hungry families this week. So it's very powerful. It's very, makes an impact. And I would say if, you can't contribute to them, also look in your own neck of the woods at local food banks in your community. Any of them could use donations in this time of inflation and lots of challenges. A lot of people are going hungry or are very food insecure. So that's something that you can do that can make a difference in someone eating this week. So please take a chance to do that.
Absolutely.
So
we will.
good.
And we encourage our listeners, if you can, feel free to follow and make a contribution on your own as well. We'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Krishnan, before we let you go, we want the listeners to be able to connect with you. Tell us what you're up to now, anything you want to share with our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, you can connect me with me through Stanford. You'll be seeing a lot of our AI work coming online, so there'll be opportunities to engage there. I'm going to be super boring. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I know, horrible, right? And Facebook as well. Any of those platforms you can reach out to me on. I'm happy to engage it. If there are any negative comments, they go to @Dinesh Milwani and not me. Only the positive stuff.